Beneath. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So we have been discussing the land revenue, settlements, right? So in this we have already discussed the permanent settlement system, which was implemented in Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, Varanasi, and northern districts of Madras. So which covers an area of 19% of total area under cultivation. One second. Okay. On demand of students. Okay. फिर लिखना है. So so what we have discussed about permanent settlement system, Amit? We have discussed and we have written extensively on that about the pros and cons of permanent settlement system. What are they? What it is? What is the system? Zamindars were given the ownership rights. The zamindars were made as intermediaries between cultivators and the state, the company, and the revenue was collected through zamindars. So where the revenue was fixed permanently without any change, and zamindars were entitled to collect the revenue from the cultivators, where they can collect even more than that also. They can retain any additional amount. And the ownership rights which was given to zamindar, if they fail to pay, then these ownership rights will be cancelled and the land would be confiscated and transferred to some other zamindar. So, but as long as they pay, as long as they submit the accounts, the zamindars can enjoy hereditary rights of these lands. Okay. So, and what are the merits and demerits of this permanent settlement system? Stable merits are stable income to the company. Fixed revenue to the company. Reduce exploitation. He meant to say earlier there is no fixed income, no? Before Permanent Settlement Act. In some cases doing this. So that's like it also has that demerit. Oh. What are the demerits then? Drawbacks. The burden of development of agriculture was put on zamindars, who seldom have done that actually. Zamindars? Hmm. Written now? Exploitation of peasants, yes. So peasants were exploited by zamindars. The revenue rate which was fixed arbitrarily, or it fixed after any kind of survey. It was fixed arbitrarily without any scientific assessment. The revenue rate was too high, and in fact, company benefited out of permanent settlement, or company not benefited actually. Benefited. Company benefited, like, okay, it has started some stable or regular supply of revenue, but ultimately, since the revenue rate was fixed permanently, so company could not increase it. So obviously company got it's a disadvantage to the company. Okay. So to overcome those, now we have Ryotwari settlement. No incentive for zamindars to invest in technology, irrigation, or land improvement. Yes. So see, basically, this Permanent Settlement Act, once it was introduced in Bengal and Bihar, Cornwallis, he was the mastermind, right? So Cornwallis wanted to introduce it to rest of the country. He wanted to introduce in the rest of the country. So after Cornwallis in 1798, when Wellesley became the Governor General, so Wellesley wanted to introduce it in Madras province. He wanted to introduce in Madras province. So he gave orders to the Madras presidency to implement what? Permanent settlement in Madras. But actually, so why I have discussed permanent settlement again here? So in permanent settlement, we have the company, and then zamindar, and then cultivator, right? So zamindars are intermediaries here. So that means when it has to be implemented in Madras, there should be a section of zamindars in Madras. But actually, the culture of large landowners, culture of zamindars was not much extensive as like Bengal in Madras. In Bengal lands were mostly in the hands of these landlords, big landlords, who hold huge estates. Whereas in the case of Madras, that was not the case. That means in Madras there were no zamindars. But to make permanent settlement act to sustainable or successful, what do we require? We require zamindars. So when it was supposed to be implemented in Madras, in fact, they introduced permanent settlement system with some modifications actually. They introduced permanent settlement system with modifications. What are they? So as there were no zamindar class in Madras, they recognized polygars as zamindars. They recognized polygars as zamindars. Who are polygars? No. No, not tribal people. Who are polygars? Polygars like, iktadars, right? Who are iktadars? Owners of iktas, or not owners actually, but those estates or iktas were granted to those officials by the king, ruler. So they used to hold these lands and they are responsible for collecting revenue, and they are also responsible for maintaining forces who could assist the king whenever in necessities, right? So similarly, polygars were also certain class of section in south, especially in Mysore and Madras state. So these polygars were recognized as zamindars now. Okay, and when there were no polygars, or when there were small lands, so those lands in those villages were aggregated into estates and kept under village communities. So in this way, particularly predominantly this one. So polygars were recognized as zamindars, and permanent settlement was tried to be introduced in Madras. So this was introduced around from 1800 to 1807 in few parts of the Madras presidency. So, but this proved to be a failure. This proved to be a failure, and at the same time, Madras revenues were also continuously dipping. That means the revenue of Madras, the economic situation of Madras need to be corrected as soon as possible, because the revenues of Madras state was depreciating gradually. And another thing is, by the time of 1807, the permanent settlement system got started to be criticized, because we have already discussed the demerits now, right? So that means agriculture was neglected. Bengal is facing destruction of agriculture. So peasants are getting suffered, peasants are exploited. State is not getting the extra revenue. You got it? So the permanent settlement also getting criticized. So that means this permanent settlement now cannot be implemented again in Madras, because it's already got affected or got much failed in Bengal. So why would they implement it in Madras? And on one side, Madras revenues are depreciating. On one side, this experiment of making polygars as recognizing polygars as zamindars also made to be proved to be failure. So in such case, yes, Suresh. In such case, so we have some officials like Alexander Reed, Thomas Munro, and Elphinstone have suggested for collecting revenue directly from the cultivators, peasants. Okay, so and in fact, Alexander Reed already implemented this system in Baramahal district in 1792, which was already a successful one. So that's why now this Thomas Munro, he implemented it in 1801 in some districts of Madras, like Ballari, Kadapa, and some seceded districts of Andhra. So in those districts, that means some of the districts of Madras, he implemented the system, the Ryotwari settlement. That means settlement made directly with peasants, right? So that means here now they remove this intermediaries. So settlement was directly with cultivator, right? So let us see this Ryotwari system. So, revenue collected directly from peasants. Revenue collected directly from peasants. Now, these peasants were recognized as owners of the land. Recognized as owners of the land. So, and they were given ownership rights where they can transfer, sell, mortgage the land. Okay. And they were given pattas. Pattas means title deed, which recognizes their ownership rights. Okay. And most importantly, what about the fixation of revenue? How the rate was fixed? Was it permanent or was it revised periodically? Revenue was fixed or revised periodically? Revised. So, in fact, it was almost fixed at 50% of the produce, and this was revised periodically. Revised periodically means it was not permanent. So, revised periodically for every 20 to 30 years. Okay. So, and how this revenue settlement was made? It was made after survey and assessment. It was fixed after survey and assessment, where they have taken into consideration quality of soil, the area under cultivation, or previous assessment, etc. Of course, it was not followed much properly actually. Sometimes they have fixed arbitrarily. Sometimes, though they carried a survey, the survey was inappropriate. But so there were drawbacks actually. But in general, they decided to fix the revenue after proper survey and assessment on the basis of these factors. Okay. So in this way, the revenue settlement was made under Ryotwari system. So in Ryotwari system, revenue collected directly from peasants. So peasants were recognized as owners of land. That means intermediaries were removed. So peasants were given ownership rights that they can transfer, sell, mortgage the land, and they were also given title deeds, pattas. That means these are agreements made with peasants. That means for every land, they need to find a peasant and they will make an agreement with peasant. So that in that agreement, it was mentioned that this peasant have to pay this much of revenue for this year. Are you getting me? So actually that is also one of the drawback which we discuss in future. Like sometimes the area was high, but the land which was under farming was less. But the tax was fixed for entire area. So sometimes it was not taken into consideration how much of land is actually cultivated rather than the entire area. You got it? So in such cases, obviously peasants got suffered. So it doesn't mean that here in Ryotwari settlement also peasants got suffered. In permanent settlement also peasants got suffered. So there they suffered under zamindars. Here they suffered directly under company. Okay. And so revenue rate was as high as 50%. Sometimes it went up to 60% as well. Okay. And it was revised periodically. And it was fixed after survey and assessment. Okay. So in this way, the revenues Ryotwari settlement was enacted. So tell me, what are the merits of this system? Peasants gets ownership rights, because in permanent settlement system, what is the drawback? Peasants were reduced to the state of landless laborers. Yesterday we have discussed now. It created a system, a kind of system. What kind of system? Serfdom. At the top, it created feudalism. At the bottom, it created serfdom. So what is serfdom? Nothing but under permanent settlement, the peasants have no right over land. They just they just till the land, cultivate the land, they produce and they pay revenue to the zamindar. Still, they don't have any right over the land. So that means they can be evicted from the land at the will of zamindar. Here, at least peasants have some sense of ownership. So as long as that peasant paid revenue to the state, peasants were not evicted from the land. So that is one merit. So peasants got right over land. Yes, yes, Kushi. So now obviously in permanent settlement act, what we have seen, what is the drawback? The peasants were exploited by zamindars, middlemen. But now middleman was removed. So no absentee landlordism. Yesterday I have discussed one thing, no? Like under zamindar, there were many smaller zamindars who were all profit seeking zamindars. Who all of them tried to exploit as much as from the peasants. So that's called as absentee landlordism. So such absentee landlordism was absent here, right? Or reduced. Yes, yes, Kushi, very good. So, but actually, they have done that rarely. Actually, the point which you have mentioned. Sometimes, despite poor situations, crop failures, or famines, or lack of irrigation, still the company tried to extract the exact revenue. Okay, but still, we'll take that. So, company can reduce the rents in distress situations. And revenue was based on, yes. So revenue was fixed after survey and assessment. Develop agri. Yes. So peasants have some incentive to develop agriculture. And so you're all thinking from the peasant point of view only. What about the company point of view? What are the merits? Stable income. Whatever, you're forgetting one thing. Whatever they collect, all can be retained by them only. Earlier, they have to share some percentage with zamindars. Or suppose earlier, if they have to share 1/11 with zamindar, where 10/11 goes to the company. That means now this is not necessary. So they removed. So there is no middleman. So no need of share of revenues. That means all the revenues from any piece of land goes to the company only. So that means as compared to earlier, as compared to Bengal, income will be more. And another thing is, under Permanent Settlement Act, the revenue rate was, the revenue settlement was fixed. They cannot increase it. They fix it in perpetuity. That means forever. So even though the land is producing more, but state will get less. You get me? But here, depending upon the, because it was surveyed and assessed annually, periodically, isn't it? So the revenue can increase depending upon production, which is not possible in permanent settlement system. Okay, so these are few of the merits of Ryotwari settlement. Now tell me the drawbacks, demerits. Demerits, higher revenue. Higher revenue rates. So though it was mentioned that they would fix the revenue rate after scientific survey and assessment, that was not done actually. So sometimes the rates were fixed very arbitrarily, or if they have done any survey, these surveys were inappropriate. Just now I have mentioned, no, like they tried to fix the revenue for entire area, even though the farmer is cultivating only this piece. Right? So, but they are collecting revenue for entire area. In some cases, farmer is producing different types of crops in different farmlands in an area. Okay, so should the revenue differs from each farm, or it should be uniform throughout for the entire area? How can it be uniform? Because this will give some other some yield, this will give other yield, this will give other yield. So every crop will not give the same yield. every farm will not have the same quality of or same fertility. So yield would be different. So produce would be different. So rent should be different. But how can it be uniform? Do you get me? But they fixed uniform. But they fixed uniform. So who would suffer? Peasant would suffer. Are you getting me? So can we call it as a scientific assessment? No. So that's why it is inappropriate. So due to this, peasants got suffered. And higher administrative and enforcement costs. Explain it. Okay. Yes. Obviously, it resulted in increasing the expenditure of state on these surveys and assessments periodically. Yes, we can say that as well. Right. Okay. So yes, we can say that. See, since there are no intermediaries, so it is a direct conflict between company and peasants. So, see, for suppose Deccan Rights, 1875. What is Deccan Rights? What happened during the time of Deccan Rights? No, Deccan Right, Deccan. Huh? Achha. Actually, what happened in 1875? Deccan Rights occurred actually. So why these Deccan riots occurred? Because in 1860s, especially from 1861 onwards, usually there was a huge demand for cotton in Europe because of textile boom. So at that time, these European merchants used to import much cotton from America. But what happened in 1861? American Civil War broke out. So when American Civil War broke out, the cotton production in southern colonies has decreased. So when it was decreased, these European merchants, especially British merchants, started looking for India for production of cotton, especially from Deccan region, Bombay province, right? So obviously, since there was much demand, these farmers also increased the Deccan production. So they got some incentives from the government. They also have taken some money from the money lenders, and they have increased the cotton production. Initially, they also secured some profits also because there was a demand in Europe. So when the cotton production increased and farmers are in a better position, the state also increased the rent. So nearly there was an increase of 60% increase in rent. Sometimes in some areas it was doubled. Some areas it was doubled as well. So, but all of a sudden, when the Civil War ended in America, again these British merchants shifted their focus to America when cotton production resumed in America. So who will get affected? The Deccan peasants gets affected. So the rent was still high. They already have taken money from money lenders. Now there was no one to purchase their cotton. So ultimately they got affected, and in 1875 that resulted in revolt against the money lenders in Pune, Satara, Ahmednagar regions in Deccan. Okay, so that's the incident of Deccan riots. So that's because it's like a conflict between, not only between money lenders and peasants, but also conflict between the company and the state and the peasants, because of high collection of rents, high collection of revenue. Right? So the various drawbacks and merits of Ryotwari settlement system. So these are the, in fact, in comparison of these three, Ryotwari, Mahalwari, and permanent settlement right. So which was implemented in large areas? Ryotwari implemented in 51% of total area under cultivation. Okay, so it's also part of that. In few cases, they were forced to grow. Okay, so write down. कैंपे चाहिए आज थोड़ा ज्यादा ही है हाँ सीरियसली बारिश होने वाला है कल एक्चुअली मैंने सोचा बट हाँ ये भी सही है हाँ he is क्या बोलते हैं not deserve to say that year में अगर if there are 100 classes you hardly come 20 classes जी देखो मतलब 50 तो कम ही है put the heading Ryotwari settlements. Put the heading Ryotwari settlements. Cornwallis expected that his permanent settlement system would be extended to other parts of the country. Would be extended to other parts of the country. Okay. In 1798, Lord Wellesley gave the orders to extend permanent settlement system to Madras Presidency. Madras Presidency. However, there was a problem. There was a problem that there was no zamindars. There was no zamindars with large estates. There was no zamindars with large estates. Large estates in Madras. In Madras, with whom revenue settlement could be made. With whom the revenue settlement could be made. This would upset the existing state of affairs. Existing state of affairs. Madras officials like Alexander Reed. Madras officials like Alexander Reed. And Thomas Munro suggested that settlement be made with cultivators. Suggested that settlement be made directly with cultivators. But still, the Madras Authority implemented permanent settlement. But still, the Madras Authority implemented permanent settlement in many areas. Between 1801 to 1807. Okay. The local polygars were recognized as zamindars. The local polygars were recognized as zamindars. Next, where polygars were absent, where polygars could not be found, the villages were aggregated into estates. Villages were Villages, not villagers. Villages were aggregated, AGG, RA, GATED, aggregated into estates, estates. In few parts of the country, school बोलते हैं. हाँ 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 कहा हाँ यस. तो बट फिर एस्टेट्स को क्या बोलते हैं? स्टेट्स को एस्टेट्स बोलते हैं. फिर एस्टेट्स को सेम हो जाता है. That's she wrote that only. Estates, aggregated into estates and sold to highest bidders, and sold to highest bidders. Okay. Okay. Next point. But before this could go far, the permanent settlement was growingly criticized. Growingly criticized. Meanwhile, next point. Meanwhile, many officials like Thomas Munro, Elphinstone, suggested alternatives. Okay, next. David Ricardo's theory of rent. David Ricardo's theory of rent also seemed to be hinting at revision. Theory of rent also seemed to be hinting for revision of existing system. Hinting for revision of existing system. Okay. The financial position of Madras presidency also diminishing. The financial position of Madras presidency is also diminishing gradually due to war expenses. to war expenses. Okay. Next point. These above factors acted as genesis for implementation of Ryotwari settlement. What are the factors I have mentioned? One is increasing criticism of permanent settlement, failure of the system that was introduced between 1801 to 1807 in different parts of Madras, and diminishing financial position of Madras Presidency, and alternative suggestions made by Madras officials like Munro and Elphinstone, and as well as David Ricardo's theory of rent, which also suggested to collect the revenue directly from the peasants. Okay, so due to these factors, Ryotwari system was introduced. Okay. So the Ryotwari system, the Ryotwari settlement, was implemented in Madras, Bombay, Sindh, Assam, and Coorg, Coorg, and Coorg, in different phases. In different phases. Phases. यहाँ phases क्यों आएगा? Phases. PHASES. Okay. It was implemented, or it was started by Alexander Reed. Alexander Reed. Here it is. Started by Alexander Reed in Baramahal district of Madras in 1792. It was started by Alexander Reed in Baramahal district of Madras in 1792 and was continued by Thomas Munro from 1801. So actual implementation from 1801, but technically started in 1792 itself. Okay. Features. The revenue collected directly from the peasants. Intermediaries were removed. The cultivators were made, the peasants were made, the landowners landowners. Every registered holder, every registered holder, holder means holder of land. Every registered holder of land, is recognized as proprietor of land, is recognized as proprietor of land, and is held responsible for direct payment of revenue to the state. Payment of direct payment of revenue to the state. He can transfer, mortgage, or sell it. Sorry. He can transfer, mortgage, or sell it. Next, he is not evicted from land as long as he pays the state demand. He is not evicted from land as long as he pays the state demand. He is not evicted from land as long as he pays the state demand. Okay. The land revenue was revised periodically for every 20 to 30 years. Revised means generally revision goes upwards or downwards? Upwards, increase. So the land revenue was revised periodically after every 20 to 30 years. Okay. Under field assessment system, yes, Kushi. Last point. Last point is the land revenue was revised periodically. The land revenue was revised periodically for every 20 to 30 years. For every 20 to 30 years. Okay. Right. Under field assessment system, the rent payable on each land was assessed through general survey of lands. Assessed through general survey of lands. And then you can write a separate point or continue also. And then write separate point one. And then annual agreement annual agreement was made with or made between peasant and government. Made between peasant and government, who had choice between accepting or rejecting. Accept choice between accepting or rejecting. If he accepts, he would get a patta. If he accepts, he would get a patta. He would get a patta or a title deed. Get a patta or a title deed. Patta means agreement. Patta is like it recognizes that you are holder of this land, like a passbook. Like a passbook. For suppose if you are holding some land, so what's the proof that you are holding that land? You're owner of that land. Passbook only. That's called as pattadar passbook. Called as pattadar passbook. So that's like same here. Patta or title deed. Here I have written Aditya. Title deed. Title deed means like this title deed is given to farmer, which this patta or title deed recognizes that you are holder of this land, and we already made an agreement now. It means you have to pay to government. So it also mentions how much you have to pay to the government. So that's why I mentioned annual agreements are made between peasants and government. So either peasant, if he wants to get into agreement with the government, so he will accept the agreement. Otherwise, it will be given to someone else. No one accepts. The land will be kept fallow. You can write that also if you want. No one accepts the land. The land would be kept fallow. Fallow means uncultivated. Left uncultivated. Okay. The land survey was made on the basis of quality of soil, area of the field or area under cultivation, area of the field, and the average produce. Average produce means like previous assessment. Okay. Okay. You can write in the bracket. Write one word in the bracket. But in practice, the estimates were often. The estimates were often a guesswork. Did you understand the point? So in many cases, they did not survey it actually. It was just guessed. Okay, this will be this much, like that. So that's why we cannot say it is a scientific survey. So that's why peasants suffered actually. Okay. So these are the features. Okay. Next, write separately, giving one line gap. This settlement was implemented in different phases. This settlement was implemented in different phases. The first phase in 1801, 1801. Second phase in 1820. Second phase in 1820. And third phase in 1855. (1855). 55. 55 they implemented in Bombay actually. Okay. Merits. Merits. Put the heading merits. It provided stable income to the state. Stable income to the state. Peasants were recognized as owners of land. It reduced the absentee landlordism. I have written with second line. It reduced the absentee landlordism. Revenue was fixed after survey and assessment. Okay. Peasants are left with some incentive to develop agriculture. Next. As middlemen were removed, middlemen or intermediaries. As intermediaries were removed, the entire revenue goes to the state. Entire revenue goes to the state. Next. As revenue was not fixed permanently, and it was revised periodically, and it was increased periodically, and it was increased periodically, ultimately improved the finances of the state. Finances of the state. Okay. Demerits. Demerits. The rent was sometimes as high as the rent collected was sometimes as high as 60%. The rent collected was sometimes as high as 60%. The revenue. Oh, one second. In many areas, no surveys were carried out. In many areas, no surveys were carried out, and tax was assessed arbitrarily. Tax was assessed arbitrarily. Based on village accounts. This is called as woodcut settlement. It is called as woodcut settlement. Next, the revenue to be paid by the peasants. The revenue to be paid by the peasant was fixed on his entire farm. Not on each field. Are you? I have written somewhere, no? Yes. We have discussed that point. We have discussed that. So they have fixed the rent for entire area uniformly rather than taking into consideration different farms actually. Okay. Next, where survey was taken place, next point, where survey was, that means in one case there is no survey, in other case it was unscientific. The third case, like where survey was taken place The survey was taken place actually, it was hastily executed, like speedily, HASTILY, hastily executed, resulting in over assessment. Over assessment. Okay, good. One case, no service. Another case, uniform rate instead of considering individual forms. Third case, they try to complete the process very speedily, resulting in over assessment. Okay. The high revenue rates impoverished peasants. The high revenue rates impoverished, 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 that means pushing the farmers into poverty, impoverished the peasants and ultimately affecting the cultivation. Next, the system did not also eliminated village elites as intermediaries. Elites, ELITES, village elites as intermediaries. Okay. Next, the revenue officials sometimes resorted to coercion, 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 bribery, and corruption. Coercion, 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 bribery, and corruption. Sometimes the revenue was increased to 60%. To 60%. Inequalities increased in irrigated and non-irrigated areas. Irrigated and non-irrigated areas. In Andhra region, this system resulted in differentiation within the peasants, peasantry, within the peasantry. That means like inequality within the peasantry, big peasants and small peasants. According to Elphinstone, and Chaplin's reports, Elphinstone was governor and Chaplin was the commissioner of Deccan. Okay. According to Elphinstone and Chaplin's reports, the revenue settlements in Bombay, the revenue settlement in Bombay did not yield as much as revenue they hoped for. Did not yield revenue as much as they hoped for, as much revenue as they hoped for. Okay. This system also led to agrarian riots, agrarian riots in Deccan in 1875. This is not the only reason. There were other reasons also, but still you can take it down. Agrarian riots in Deccan in 1875, especially in Bombay province. Okay, so these are various demerits of the Ryotwari settlement. Okay, so this is it about the Ryotwari settlement system. We are left with only one thing, that is Mahalwari, which is implemented in Punjab and northwestern frontier provinces. Okay, so we continue tomorrow. Vinit, you coming tomorrow? Yes, sir. Coming tomorrow? कुछ ज्ञान दिया ना अशोक को कि पहले दिन ही नहीं आएगा तो नहीं होगा सेल्फ डिक्लेरेशन बाकी आया नहीं बट तुमको आना चाहिए यस मैम बिल्कुल नहीं है आर यू कमिंग और नॉट अच्छा अच्छा मैम को वही सुनाई देते हैं। हाँ, that's वही बोला ना। Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kushi. Same to you. Advance Happy New Year.